Ladies and gentlemen, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, buonasera ragazzi, cześć, dzień dobry. This is the newspaper's Freedom of Press Club, Demokratischer Widerstand, Democratic Resistance. And tonight we're very proud and honored to have the founder and leading activist of Save Our Rights UK, Louise Creffield. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
So now's the 7th of May 2021. Let us know, please, Louise Creffield, when did you found your basic rights movement? What you're up to?
So we founded on the 16th of April 2020. The UK was put into lockdown on the 23rd of March, and we were told it would be for 3 weeks. And then on the day that the 3 weeks expired and they extended lockdown, that's when I knew that we were going to have to take action if we ever wanted to regain our rights and freedoms. I gave them the 3 weeks grace, and they obviously extended it further. So I started Save Our Rights UK on the 16th of April, and we have been working ever since. I have history in politics, so I felt like that could be useful to the movement because I understand how the political system works here in the UK and how best to take action and campaign for something that you want. So at the moment, our biggest campaign is one for a medical freedom bill, which would prevent any sort of mandation of any tests or vaccines. It would also prevent anybody being coerced into having them. It would also prevent any companies preventing people accessing their services or accessing jobs for not having a test or vaccine. And it would also prevent any discrimination against somebody based upon that as well. So it would kind of all encompass all the issues around testing and vaccines that we're seeing, and it would give us a positive step that we could take, because one of my experiences from working in politics is they don't like it when you just go no. They want to, they say that's not good enough and you have to tell them what you want. So that's why we're campaigning for a medical freedom bill, not just saying no to vaccine passports or no to mandatory testing. We're kind of saying this is what we want, and we feel like the government ought to be giving it to us because obviously any sort of mandation or coercion is against many international laws, as I'm sure you're aware. And so that's our current big campaign that we're running at the moment.
Since censorship is taking place on YouTube a lot with the Google corporation, we can't discuss everything without getting deleted, but we'll take the try. What's your reasons to oppose or propose a medical freedom bill in the UK?
So for me, and I fully appreciate that we've just had our YouTube account deleted. Unfortunately, we've made it this far, but it's just gone. And for us, we would like a medical freedom bill because the government aren't there to give us our rights and freedoms. They're there to protect our rights and freedoms from any potential infringements. And of course, any sort of mandating of tests and any sort of mandation or coercion for vaccines is against our rights and freedoms. We have a right to bodily autonomy, and it's against all medical ethics. People cannot consent to a medical procedure without free and informed consent, and you can't be free if there's a coercion, if there's a condition on it. And so therefore the government should be looking at this and saying, no, we have to prevent this. That is the natural stance that a government should be taking on this. And for some reason, they're actively promoting this, and that can't be allowed, can't be accepted. And that's why we're campaigning and saying, no, we need a medical freedom bill. And that's because it's the only way to protect our rights and freedoms, and that is what the government is there for.
What we see here is that you're having huge demonstrations for Save Our Rights UK, and in some way the democratic movement and liberation movement in England. What we heard is that on 24th of April, around about 700,000 Democrats, people, have been demonstrating in London to end the Corona regime in England. Is that true? And why didn't BBC and our mainstream newspapers and stately driven radio stations and television have been reporting on this?
Yeah, there were hundreds and thousands of people out on the streets of London on the 24th of April, and it was phenomenal because the first protest that we did in Brighton on the 20th of April in 2020 had 6 people. So we've come a phenomenal way in a year, and it was interesting because at the end of last year we were doing big demonstrations in London every month, and we were being policed very heavily. And on this occasion, there was barely any police presence at all, and it was a very strange atmosphere because it was like, where are they? Why are they not doing anything? Because, by and large, the situation hadn't changed from last year. But I think one of the reasons why they didn't police it heavily, they didn't make many arrests, is because then there was nothing to report on. And that's one of the tactics is, had there been hundreds of arrests, then it would have been something that the newspapers would have had to report on. Whereas this way, they kept it quiet. It was very minimally reported on. None of the group names were mentioned, interestingly, even though they know who it is that run these events. But it's like they almost didn't want to direct people to us. Like they didn't want to. They were just like, they've previously published our names. They know who we are. They have my phone number. They could ring me if they wanted to. But this time they just actively kept it very quiet. Because I don't think they want us to get any bigger. And I've seen lots of people who've been previously scared to come out with us when the numbers were small for fear of recrimination, feeling more confident and saying that they want to come to the next one because there's so many. There's that real strength in numbers feeling now that they feel like they can come and they won't necessarily affect their own career. And, personally, I say, don't worry about the career. Freedom's more important, but there are some barriers for some people for entry on this thing. So, but they kept it very quiet because the more they report on it, the more we grow, basically. So it was very frustrating, but it shows that we're making an impact.
Well, that sounds quite similar to the anti-corona regime democratic movement in Germany. Since 14 months, we're having huge demonstrations in Berlin, 2 of them with participants over 1 million or 500,000 up to 1.3 million demonstrators, demonstrating, all of them for our liberal constitution, the so-called Grundgesetz, basic rights law. And they're just neglecting it or just really telling the wrong numbers, like there would be kind of a ban. There may not ever be a number reported above 20,000. So they always report these kind of magical numbers of 20,000 demonstrators. And then they show policemen that go into the crowd as harshly as not anymore since 1945 in Germany. It's not even it's even worse than in the GDR in the end. It is absolutely horrific what's going on, especially since 5 months in Germany, and we can't believe it. But in the end, there is some kind of reports going on about the democratic movement that is not only consistent of Querdenken, which is the biggest kind of organization in it, but there's Nicht ohne uns. 2, there's the newfound democratic union, since unions are somehow on the government and capital side of the corporations and so on. And media still is reporting on it like some kind of false right-wing movement, but it's all the people. What about the consistency? What people is it demonstrating amongst your demonstrations and with Save Our Rights UK?
Yeah, similar here. We're being painted as far right. However, I would say I'm more left than anything, but coming up for more centre these days. But we have all sorts of people. We had a whole Sikh movement out with us. We've had ex-military personnel out with us.
Yeah.
We've got nurses. We've got professionals. We've got working class. We've got children. We've got every race, every creed, every religion. We have got somebody from every area and walk of life, because this affects us all. It doesn't just affect anybody. It's been a really interesting movement for me, because like I say, I fall more to the left, and so therefore in my kind of previous political campaigning, I've just dealt with people on the left, whereas this time I've dealt with people from all across the spectrum, and and how wonderful to unite and not be divided in that way. We're not, because as far as I'm concerned, right and left is just another form of division, and it's just another tactic to keep us from really utilizing the power that we could have. And so I love it. I love that we all come together on this and that we're all uniting on this. And yeah, it has been interesting to see how they try and smear and try and turn people off by throwing the whole far right thing in wherever they can.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's what we have too, and we're here absolutely sure that we in the end will be victorious in a way for a liberal constitution and for a real election about the measures and our own future. And it's so many people coming. It's really the people coming. Something like we had last time in 1989 in Germany to tear down the wall. And but this time they really try everything to neglect the people are peacefully rising up and saying we don't want it that way. We're not neglecting viruses or the need of a health system that's really caring for health, but we want to discuss democratically our future and then decide all of it on our own. And by every week this is going on, people have new demands of the things they want to decide on themselves. So meanwhile, this movement, the democratic movement in Germany, has been founded on 28th of March, 3 days after the state of exception. This interregnum has been announced by the Merkel regime, the government, and is growing ever since. So we're still growing day by day. We're millions and millions and millions of people in Germany, and they more and more neglect it or try to put it into, well, some kind of right-wing 19th century kind of weirdos that somehow live in the past centuries of the past, which is simply not true. It's the movement here has been founded by, well, liberals, leftists, friendly, peaceful conservatives, just the people. And that's an interesting, harsh, warlike strategy they're going here against millions of the people from the middle of society and from and intellectuals. For example, the co-founder of and publisher of our newspaper, Democratic Resistance, is Professor Giorgio Agamben, one of the most well-known scientists and philosophers in the world, an Italian, who is for decades now publishing about the so-called biopolitics and the state of exception. And they just neglect it. It's just those. And what is interesting, is it the same in England, that it is not opposed, the democratic movement is not really opposed by leftists or the people or organizations itself, the normal members, but by the functionaries in it, those careerists, those people who are already getting a lot of money in the hierarchies of unions and the government and corporations and foundations.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of people making a lot of money through this at the moment, and we've, and it's even for here in the UK, our health secretary got found guilty by the High Court of giving contracts to his friends, but because of the system that we live in here in the UK, there's no consequences to those actions. He was found guilty. It went in the papers. People now know he's guilty, but nothing changes, nothing happens. And for me, that's just not, there should be consequences. If a minister gets found guilty of a crime, they shouldn't hold their seat anymore. That should just be done, especially if it's a crime that they've committed as a minister. But yeah, there are a lot of corporations that are supporting this, and we're having this big battle at the moment with the kind of entertainment, leisure industry, because they're so desperate to be allowed to open that they're almost asking for vaccine passports and stuff like that, because in the hope that they will then be allowed to open and be able to kind of make some money this summer. But what they don't realize is that they are actually being made to create the whole system. So, it requires a whole lot of tech abilities and a whole lot of finance to go into having these systems. And ultimately, we want to demonstrate that we're going to be boycotting. So one of the things that we have is we have something called Politicize, which is a tool that we have that means that we can do huge mailing campaigns in a very short space of time. We can target people. We can, we sent tens of thousands of emails to Boris Johnson in 24 hours. He was getting one every 4.5 seconds or something. And it just flooded his inbox telling him that we say no. So we're planning on doing the same with the companies that are planning on bringing in vaccine passports and stuff, to let them know that the people say no. Because what they're interested in is making money. So we have to let them know that if they go down this route, that there is enough people that will boycott, that they won't be making money. So yeah, we're having to tackle that there's so many different levels to tackle. And yeah, that's definitely one of them here in the UK too.
It's so great to speak to you, Louise, and thanks for your time so far. What do you think? How many people have to come to change something of this policy? So if there have been 400,000 or 700,000 in London demonstrating against the mostly unexplained corona measures, how many would have to come to change this?
For me, I think history shows us that 3.5% of a population can change everything.
Yeah.
You need 3.5% who are willing to take action and coordinate action. And so that doesn't necessarily have to be out on the streets. There are plenty of actions that you can do. Like I say, we do the mail shots and we do other actions as well. So, and ultimately, we're going to have to all come together, and we're all going to have to take coordinated action. And even if we coordinate these sorts of actions across nations as well, would be even more powerful, because that's what they fear the most, is coordinated action. And so yeah, for us here in the UK, 3.5% works out about 2 million. But we're definitely on our way, and the momentum is growing. And yeah, it's just figuring out communication with all those people, and as you know, the censorship is a real problem, and it can be really difficult to get out to that many people. So we're having to work on that, work on how we communicate with all these people, how we can get everyone to coordinate at the same time for the same message and for the same thing. But we will have a presence on the Worldwide Demo Day on the 15th of May, but then we're also out at the end of the month as well on the 29th of May. And we will be out at we'll do one big one every month. But every Sunday, There's over 500 protests across the UK every Sunday
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah. We're having that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're busy and we're out, but they will ignore us for as long as they can. And that's why, the actions will have to adjust, strategy will have to adjust. But for now, we're still gathering the numbers. And then once we have that, then we can move and decide what actions are going to need to be taken to make the most impact.
Yeah. So maybe we'll at some point have another conference. Since the beginning, we have good context to contacts to people in the Netherlands, in France, in Poland, in Israel, in Canada, in Russia, in Scandinavia, and so on, Austria, Switzerland, and so on, and so on. It seems like a democratic way to get rid of the corona regime is only given to the Swiss people, who will have an election about it, a referendum in June. What do you think of that? Is there a way to maybe organize ourselves to hold our own elections? Because people in Germany are up to something like that, where we're about to, people openly discuss, meanwhile, how to overthrow the government and implement, re-establish our liberal constitution by themselves, and just declare the government not kind of their government anymore. What do you think of that kind of way to really try to establish a basic democracy?
Absolutely. I've said from the beginning that Save Our Rights' ultimate aim is to implement what I would call a real democracy. Here in the UK, we don't have a democracy. What we have is a faux democracy. It's a pretense. We have no real mechanisms to challenge the government. We have no mechanisms to make our voices heard, and they actively ignore them. I've always admired the fact that the Swiss have the referendum option, and that is something that I think should be in every single democratic system, that ability for the people to say no to something that they don't like. It's not a democracy if there isn't that simple mechanism in place. And this is, like I say, Save Our Rights is partnering with it's a piece of software called Politicize. And that will eventually be able to give people, we could hold elections, you could hold votes, you could get it out to everybody and get everyone to vote, and then use that and say, look, this is how the nation has voted. It might not be done via your system, but this is what the people say, and this is therefore what we're going to use. So Politicize is something that we're hoping to be able to bring internationally so that others can use it. It's like an advanced piece of software that we're having made and is in process of being made. And we, as far as I'm aware, because it depends on how the other political systems work. But I think we've figured out ways to make it work for each nation. So this is something that we've got in the pipelines, because we want to start holding our own votes. We want to start showing what we believe and show what the people's real thoughts and feelings are on this in a way that is quantifiable. You can't dispute it, and start saying, this is what we believe in, this is our democracy, this is our voice, and this is how we feel like it should be. And ultimately, here in the UK, my aim is to implement what I'd call a real democracy, which has some similar mechanisms like the referendum option that the Swiss employ, because I think that's great. I think it's not a democracy if you don't have that. And here, the only mechanism we have is a judicial review. They've not been successful so far, and the government are trying to take our right to have them. So we're really stuck in a system here that does not serve us at all.
Well, currently, same here. But something that is deeply in the hearts of Germans is that they don't want to scare their neighbors. And people, meanwhile, since 14 months now, daily demonstrations are taking place everywhere in the country. And now people are up to a constitutional assembly in Berlin, or maybe in Kassel, a city in the center of Germany. Would it, from your own personal perspective, if Germans nowadays would, proclaim their own will and kind of re-establish their liberal constitution with some new articles that make possible direct democracy and referendums and so on and so on, would it, as an English woman, would it scare you if Germans would do that nowadays?
No, I would cheer. I'd cheer you guys on. That would be wonderful. I think people would only be scared if they don't understand, and and that's what we're seeing with this whole coronavirus thing over the last 14 months. Is people are scared because they don't understand, because they're going off what they're being told, and I think it's likely you would be portrayed as being something scary if you did that. However, I think it would be wonderful, and I think it would be, one of us basically needs to do it first, and then the rest of us it'll be easier for us to follow, which is why we all need to coordinate and work together, so that we're all making these moves and all doing it together, because it will be like a dominoes effect. Once one manages it, then the others will be able to follow much easier. And I don't really mind who goes first. The end goal is the same for us all, and the more of us that are on the same page and with that goal in mind, the better.
Yeah, here we're hoping a little bit for the Frenchmen, since the French Revolution is some kind of well connotated and seen as some kind of example where some progressive movement went through, even though the effects at that time weren't for a couple of years not that glorious, but in the end it had quite an effect which brought us liberal rights. And so we hope a bit for the Frenchmen, but maybe you're first, so we cheer to you as well. And we've been very much impressed by the 24th of April, seeing so many people in London without any policemen opposing, because and I'm trying to, at least terrorize the people, because we've seen before horrific pictures from London shown to me by my wife, Louise. Her name is Louise too. She's from London too, by the way. I think you've met in London last year. Mm-hmm. And it is, and we've been somehow happy that it wasn't that violent and harsh here. But meanwhile, during that kind of lockdown forever we're having currently here since 5 months, the police turned into something I can't name anymore. There are only historic relations to be named. It's absolutely absurd. They try to kick in the doors of lawyers, oppositional lawyers. They kick in the doors and search the houses of judges who stick to the Constitution and defend it. One judge in Weimar, the city of Weimar, has freed pupils by wearing the masks in school and freed them from any testing and vaccination terror and so on. And he got kind of, police shown up like gangsters in his house, took his phone, took his files, and he's been suspended and harassed. That's taking place. Then free newspapers, free websites, our newspaper too. There are shutdowns of their bank accounts. So they really try to get rid of us by all illegal, criminal kind of ways. And they, I've been imprisoned 3 times by now for handing out my own newspaper mainly. Or because of me being jogging in the winter time with the Constitution in my hands. That's what they done right away. They took away singing families from the streets. They thrown over women which were standing near demonstrations. They go into the crowd of the demonstrations and take out single persons, mainly women, by the way, and so on. Are you having such things in England too?
Yeah, so we've not had so much of the house raiding,
Yeah.
and that just sounds horrific. Just yesterday, actually, it was ruled in the High Court that children don't need to wear masks and they don't need a medical exemption as well, which is amazing. But it'll be interesting to see what comes of that, because I think the British government are scared to be seen to be kind of going that far, but what I believe they are doing is something much more covert, something much more underground, because um, I feel like there's definite movement, and there's something going on, but they're doing it very behind the scenes. I feel very much like we've got to, as the leader of Save Our Rights, and Save Our Rights' name is being, you know, yeah, it's just they're trying to discredit anybody in as many ways as they can. There's another movement going on at the moment called, because there's a bill that is going through Parliament that would prevent the right to protest. But the opposition to that is a very bizarre movement. Like, it's sprung out of nowhere. No one knows who's leading it. And the notion behind it is all a bit wrong. And then there's like an unofficial page that has used the Save Our Rights logo as well, and adapted it. And it's all just there's something just not quite right. And I feel like they've gone underground, and I feel like they're very much just trying to gather information at this point. I've got 11 charges. So I've got 3 court dates coming up. The first is on the 20th of May, where I'm facing 8 charges for organising protests and attending protests. And so ultimately I face something like £62,000 worth of fines. I think it is something like that. But yeah, so I feel like they're going for that tactic right now. I feel like they've stopped doing anything that people can see, and they've gone underground and are very much gathering intel.
Yeah. Another phenomenon that is, according to societal manners and so on, is devastating is that they somehow really play with fascist, or try to evoke kind of fascist behavior in daily life, like people turning against each other because, well, one is not wearing their pervert mask, or some shout at kids because they're running around freely and so on. It's really horrific what's going on sometimes in daily life. According to that, I heard it's a bit more liberal in England again, like no mask, won't ask, and some kind of bringing back civilized behavior, tolerance, and so on. So is that true, or is it going the same way a bit in England? Like, yeah.
I would say that you're probably right, actually. People have gotten bored of the situation now. Obviously, I've never worn a mask, and I never will. I've flown, I've traveled, I've I've shopped freely, and I've never worn a mask and won't. But I do feel like I'm getting questioned less about it, and I am seeing more people without masks now. However, in the beginning, the scientists that are advising the government are called the SAGE group, and there's a section of it called the Spy B section, and these are the psychologists. And there was a leaked government document that said that they wanted to use social disapproval to increase conformity. So they actively encouraged people to snitch and people to, give each other a hard time. to increase conformity to these measures. We had the chief of the Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, saying that you should shame people if you see them without a mask. And considering that majority of people who don't wear masks are doing so because they've got disabilities, she basically incited a disability hate crime. And we have seen a huge rise in disability hate crime on this basis. So they have tried that, but it's kind of waning. It is waning now. People are tired, people are bored, people have had enough. Even with their increased testing, we've got very few cases at the moment. Like the other day, we only had one death within 28 days of a positive test. People have had enough at the moment. I think the only thing that will kind of re-encourage it all will be a new deadly variant that doesn't succumb to the vaccine. I think that'll have to be the next thing if they want people to carry on a strong manner. But that's very much on the cards.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's time to speculate a little bit. What I perceive in Germany is that people do not really believe in the narration anymore. It's quite clear that we will not all die and that we are not all threatened by the virus, and that they are up to something else. And some seem to believe in a story that they will now be led into paradise, into a better state, into kind of environmental measures. So still the question, if we wanted to do something, take some environmental steps towards a cleaner economy or so, what would we need these measures for? And all these lies. And what's your opinion on that? What's going on in the minds of the people still following the measures or not opposing, but knowing that, well, for sure something is not true about the whole thing? And well, are they leading into paradise? What's this all about?
Yeah, I think here in the UK, so I don't know anybody that is now following all of the rules all of the time. People are now kind of at that point where they're bending the rules when it suits them and breaking the rules here, but they're like very much on the quiet, just for their own benefit, not enough to want to oppose it. And we are very much in a position where we are promised that the 21st of June is going to be kind of the day of liberation. We're going to be free. We've only got to wait till the 21st of June. It's not long. And then you can all go on holiday and all will be well. So I think people are just like, oh, well, we'll just keep quiet. We won't make a fuss because we're very British. And we'll just wait out, and like they'll kind of go along with it because then they don't get in trouble and they don't have to personally deal with it. But they'll break the rules where they can if it suits them. And and they'll just wait for the 21st of June and then all will be well. I mean, I think they're in for a shock. I'll be shocked if on the 21st of June we have our freedoms back. But we won't. And they kind of, I think people aren't listening well enough. The government hasn't said on the 21st of June, that's it, everything's gone. It's like, no, you'll be using there'll still be testing. There'll be still track and trace. There'll still be social distancing. You still won't be able to walk around a pub freely. You'll still have to use a one-way system and all this sort of stuff. And people are going from the headlines and they just see that, oh, we're going to be free, and we're not. That's not the case. And people, I think, are going to be. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we don't get all of our freedoms back on the 21st of June. I'm actually quite, interested to see how many people then come and join us and grow with us, because every time the government does something like that, our numbers increase. So I always tell people, they've just done something else that's really awful, but be grateful because it means that our numbers are increasing. And that's what we need, because even if even if 21st of June came and we were all free, I still maintain that we need to campaign for a real democracy. I think this has really highlighted the fact that we're at risk from the system that we live under, and that whole system needs changing. And in some ways, if we all become free on the 21st of June, it will be much harder to garner support for that. So it's a bit of either way, we need to keep going, and we need to keep campaigning, and we need to really change these systems that we live under so that we can never be at risk of this situation again, whether it's this summer or next autumn or 5 years down the line. This can't be allowed to happen again.
Who's profiting from the corona regime? And isn't it maybe you yourself or me even? We're having children, we can spend more time with them. Isn't it good to have a time out and to do what you like and to get some support by the government?
I don't know about you, but I love my children, but I've got 4 of them, and being off school is exceptionally hard work, especially when there's nowhere you can go. Thankfully, they have friends who are very much on the same page as us, so they manage to keep seeing friends and going to birthday parties and so on, even while school was off. But for me, like, my benefit from the state hasn't increased. There has been people who I know who have loved it because they don't like their jobs and they would much rather stay at home. And what people don't recognize is that we're going to be made to pay for this for decades to come through taxes. And this money isn't free. All this testing isn't free. Yeah, you might not have to pay for it when you go pick it up, but we will be forced to pay for it for many, many decades to come. Grandchildren will be paying for this. We're in one of the worst depressions that we've ever seen. And even if some people are doing okay within all this, and I know some people are, and I know some people have actually really enjoyed the whole thing. We have a moral obligation to speak out for those that are more vulnerable and who aren't, who are suffering, who are dying. We've got depressed people. I speak to psychologists who say that their caseload is huge and everybody is in crisis. No, it's not like everyone's just like having a bit of therapy. They're all in crisis, about to kill themselves. We've got domestic violence hugely on the increase, women being murdered, children being murdered. We've got children in the UK who are now in such poverty that they're not eating for days on end other than what they get given at school. And we've got the elderly in care homes who are literally withering away because they're not having any contact with family. We've got cancer patients who are dying. These are people that, even if those things don't directly affect us, I feel like there's a moral obligation to speak up and out for those people if we're in a position to do so. And as far as I'm concerned, any deaths caused by lockdown is too many and is unnecessary. And the ramifications of lockdown are going to continue for 5-10 years. These missed cancer treatments, this plunging into poverty, these are things that are going to have effects for many years to come. We've seen the highest number of alcohol related deaths in 20 years here in the UK as well. These are people who aren't necessarily elderly. These are people who are young, who are leaving families behind, traumatizing families in the process. Those people have now got to carry that trauma. The devastations of lockdown are huge. So some people might have enjoyed it, but they should be therefore using that time to speak out for those vulnerable people who are not enjoying it and who are dying. And that's one of my main motivations in this, is that I can't bear the thought of these people suffering and not having a voice.
So, but isn't it great to get a free vaccine in such kind of vaccination center, and to queue there with your neighbors and everything like they expect us to do? And why, if not, why wouldn't you?
Well, for me, it's the last vaccine that was brought into the UK, in circulation in the UK. that was rushed through safety testing, and was for another coronavirus. It was the swine flu vaccine in 2009. So a whole number of people got the swine flu vaccine, and 4 years down the line developed a debilitating narcolepsy, which is where they uncontrollably fall asleep. They can't stop it, can't prevent it. But these symptoms didn't show up till 4 years down the line. And just in 2019, the government lost a battle and ended up having to pay out £60 million in compensation to these people for the harms that they had caused them. And that came from the UK taxpayers' money again. And yeah, you cannot know any potential long-term effects of a vaccine that has only been around for a few months. Like, regardless of any other thing, any other, you cannot know. Like, nobody has a crystal ball, nobody can see into the future, so you don't know. And considering, there are potential long-term side effects, as we saw with the swine flu vaccine, I don't understand why anybody would risk it myself. Usual vaccines go through 5 to 10 years safety testing. And even then, you've got to weigh it up. Does the risk outweigh is the risk benefit cost appropriate? Is the benefit of getting it better than the risk? And if you're somebody who doesn't have any comorbidities and everything else like that, then you're at very low risk, even if you do catch COVID. And that's not to say you will. So for me, the benefit doesn't outweigh the potential risk. And considering we have no idea of any potential long-term side effects, I can't see how many people are weighing it up and arriving at the conclusion that the benefits outweigh the risks.
Yeah, you've been talking about all the side effects, or maybe main effects of the whole corona regime and lockdown regime. Many shops are closed, many existence economically came to an end. But isn't it that work could be substituted by digitalism? Aren't they leading us into a bright kind of digitalized future with another perspective towards work and environment and everything?
I mean, that's a matter of perception, isn't it? Because some people love it. Some people love working on Zoom. What I would question if they really understand the cognitive and physical and mental effects that has on them. It can seem easier and it can seem beneficial, but if you really truly understand how the psyche works and how physiologically we actually are made to be in close proximity to other people, you can't really see the negative effects. And it's one of those things that I don't think we'd see the true negative effects until many years down the line. But what you can do is you can look at Japan, for example. So Japan is very digitally advanced, and they're literally dying out as a nation because they're so insular and they're so confined and everything is digitized and everything else like that. Young people are no longer forming relationships, and the death rate is higher than the birth rate. And Japanese as a nation are now dying out, and the suicide rates are humongous. I know for a fact in October last year, more women committed suicide. It was about 2,500 women committed suicide in the month of October 2020. Impounded by lockdowns as well, when by that point only 2,200 people had died from COVID. So more women committed suicide in 1 month than had died from COVID from March till October in Japan. So for me, you look at nations like that where the suicide rate is so high and they're dying out as a nation, I would say that the example there is that no, it's not necessarily better for us, and we should actually be quite wary of that. So and screens have a huge negative impact on our neurotransmitters, and we have to be mindful of that and stick to nature and biology and how we were designed to be, which is in close contact with others.
So let's meet in the real world, in the analog world, as soon as possible. You're very much invited to one of our demonstrations here in Berlin or Germany-wide. From my point of view, I can only recommend a good newspaper, because since we get censored in the digital world, mainly by YouTube, and by the way, meanwhile, the German state has undertaken steps to censor the internet too. They really try it. They've sent out letters to several homepages, journalists to censor them. That's absolutely new, never seen again since 1989 in that kind of way. But what we have is since 17th of April, and meanwhile we have 46 issues, often oppositionist, democratic newspaper, and we print the 20 articles of a liberal constitution, our basic rights, on every backside, last page of every issue, and it works very well. It's now one of the, according to the numbers printed, it's one of the biggest newspapers of the Republic, meanwhile. And maybe that's the way. And we have always have a schedule with all demonstrations announced to a central homepage, or people call us and we then print the dates for the demonstrations in our newspapers, and people run all over the country, walk around to hand out the newspaper. That's something they can't really get rid of. They try to. They try to call the printers to suppress it. They sometimes even, they try to harass us. They try to shut down the bank accounts and so on and so on. But they can't really get fully rid of it. That's maybe something which we have here. But what we need soon here is something like another huge demonstration, which we had already. But it's been great to see you on 24th of April with such a number of people in London, and on the same day, I think it was in Quebec, Canada, in Montreal also. And
Yes.
there's so many demonstrations worldwide, and that it is possible to do it another way is Sweden. What do you think about Sweden? How come that obviously it's possible to have it a bit more mild, in a milder way, the whole conspiracy?
Yeah, so Sweden, I remember listening to the epidemiologist Andrew Tegnell right back at the beginning. I think I listened to him in May or last year, and he was saying that their overall strategy was that 5 years down the line, they wanted the number of deaths caused by lockdown and by COVID to be the lowest between the two of them. And this is what I'm talking about lockdowns causing so many deaths, is like, it's no good if you even manage to get the lockdown and the COVID deaths right down if you've got a huge amount of deaths caused by lockdown. You've got to have the balance. And, I don't know about you, but for here in the UK, we are using PCR tests about a 45 cycle, which obviously the WHO has said is not appropriate. The invention of the PCR test, that's not appropriate. And we're also classifying COVID deaths. Well, in the beginning, they literally just made it up. Our scientific advisor said that many of the ONS data that had COVID on the death certificate might not have been infected because many of them weren't even tested. So they just kind of were making it up in the beginning. And nowadays, anybody who dies within 28 days of a positive COVID death test is put down as a COVID death. So you could be test positive and 27 days later get hit by a bus and you'll be put down as a COVID death. That's just how it works here. So Whereas if you're not kind of acting in that way, if you're not kind of inflating the numbers and you're not like testing everybody and anybody as many times as you possibly can, you just won't have the numbers. And so where Sweden hasn't done that, they haven't seen the huge amount of numbers that they've been attributing to COVID, and also, and therefore they've been able to have a much milder approach, because they're having a much more sensible approach to the numbers and the deaths and the testing and everything else like that. You can make it look really dramatic and make it huge if you want to, by using the testing cycles and so on and so forth.
So, yeah, but still there are other ways to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I think in the end, we would welcome someone who plays a bit in the middle to somehow bring the factions together again and to go peacefully into a democratic and, if so, environmental friendly future and everything, but at least a future with basic rights, isn't it?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Louise Creffield. Congratulations to your, you've been given the Prize of the Republic here in Germany. So it'd be great to hand it over to you soon, if possible, if they let us travel again. And then, see you soon again, maybe with democratic colleagues in France and Canada and so on. And so on. Thank you very much, Louise Creffield, saveourrightsuk.
Thank you.